Hey guys, Jay here, and spoiler season for Deep Rock Galactic is almost upon us. It's almost time to start talking about what's going to be coming into the game for Season 5, but that doesn't change the fact that we still have almost 2 full months of Season 4, and for better or worse, we still have it with us. In fact, as of this video's recording, the devs are going to be doing their On the Horizon live stream in a few days, where they will go over all the details about what's coming in Season 5, and as well as other projects that they are working on. So in lieu of that, I want to take one good last look at Season 4 as a whole and talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Was Season 4 really all that bad, or did they just set the bar a little bit too high in the beginning of seasons? I don't know. We're going to talk about that all right now. So if you guys are ready, let's take one last good look at Season 4 and see if it was really all that bad or if we just overreacted a bit. So I think it's safe to say that Season 4 has been polarizing for a lot of people, to say the least. A lot of people have had a lot of very strong opinions about it. And whether bad or good, it is definitely one of the most talked about seasons in the game to date. This season, like all seasons, brought a lot of new players into the game, which is great, but it also made a lot of people take big breaks, which is something very important to note. A lot of people, for one reason or another, just did not like where this season was going. They didn't like where it was coming from, and they just took very long hiatuses from it. So first, I think it's important to know exactly what came in the season and what didn't come in this season, so that we know where people are coming from and what we're dealing with. I've already gone into big details about pretty much everything involving Season 4, so I'm just going to give a brief notion as to all the stuff that came with it. So the main thing that came with Season 4 was a lot of new enemies. That was kind of the big major thing that happened with Season 4, is we got a lot of new enemies. We got a whole lot of new Rockbox enemies to deal with. The Rockbox Exploder, Spitter, Bomber, and Nadosite Breeder, which definitely were very oppressive on release. People were not really big fans of Rockbox to begin with after what had happened in Season 3, and the addition of these new enemies kind of just accelerated things to a level that people were not super comfortable with. Especially the Spitter and the Exploder were very overtuned in the beginning. Ultimately, this didn't necessarily sit well with people who were already not big fans of Rockbox. And then we also had 2 new generic enemies that were added in that just can show up whenever, which is the Stingtail and the Septic Spreader, which, oh boy, they were also very much overtuned at the very beginning of the season. The Stingtail specifically was incredibly overwhelming and oppressing to a lot of people. It was very difficult to deal with. It could grab you a bunch of times. It was very durable. It was almost as difficult to kill as a Praetorian, and it was just overall incredibly annoying. The Septic Spreader wasn't quite as bad, in my opinion. I don't think it was quite as oppressive as the Stingtail, but it was still kind of annoying, the fact that it could hit you without you even being able to see it, and you really couldn't do a whole lot of stuff about it. But ultimately, all of these enemies, including the Rockbox ones, had significant changes to them that made them a lot more manageable, which we'll talk about later. But yeah, in the beginning, these enemies were incredibly annoying and in some cases furious to deal with. And then we had the big ticket enemy, which is the Lithophage Corruptor, i.e. Herald. Herald was basically the big seasonal event, the big massive boss type enemy that was the whole crux of this whole particular season. This was supposed to be the thing that you wanted to do the most out of this particular season. This was basically the Lithophage equivalent of the Caretaker from the Rival days, and this was meant to be their big ticket boss enemy that you would go up against. And Herald sucked. He sucked in the very beginning, I think it's safe to say. He was not very fun to deal with. He moved incredibly fast. He tried to run away from you at every single opportunity given, and his attacks were very difficult to tell where they were going to hit you at. He did a lot of damage, and just the overall Rockbox generation was insanely difficult to deal with. So he was definitely a very big issue for a lot of people. Now I think he's in a much better position than he was before. I think he's significantly more easy to deal with. He's still a little bit of an annoyance, and sometimes I don't like going up against him too much, but I think overall he's a lot better to deal with now versus in the very beginning. But overall, yeah, he was just very, very difficult to deal with. And then the season also brought a lot of smaller, more secondary type changes. It added the Jet Boot Crate, which is the crate that can randomly spawn on missions that you can unlock, and it can give you jet boots that you can use to fly around in, which is really, really cool. I think that these are relatively balanced in the sense that they are very powerful and very strong, and they essentially make the Scout useless, which, you know, is kind of a plus. But they're also balanced in the sense that they're very rare. They don't really show up a whole lot. You can get one and then not get one for like 5 or 6 missions. So I think they're balanced in the sense that they're relatively rare. And then we also got the arcade game in the space rig to go along with it, to help us practice said jet boot game, and also just give us something else fun to do with the space rig. So that was also a fun addition. Then we had the Randomizer drink, which is probably my personal favorite thing that this season had. It is a drink that you can order from the Abyss Bar that randomizes your entire loadout from top to bottom, weapons, overclocks, cosmetics, the way you look. It just randomizes everything, and you don't know what your loadout is going to be going into your next mission. And it's just a little fun thing to do if you're somebody who has everything and you have a lot of really good builds and you start to get bored. You can use this and maybe you'll get a build that looks terrible but actually turns out to be pretty good. So this is probably my favorite feature. And then they did several smaller quality of life changes, like copy and pasting loadouts if you wanted to try some sort of loadout that's slightly different from one that you already have, or just straight up randomizing loadouts from the equipment terminal so you can have a little bit more randomness in that. And then just a bunch of different weapon balance changes and tweaks that make them feel a little bit better and smoother. There was a couple of tweaks that happened with that. So overall, a lot of things were actually added into this season. I think that one thing that needs to be said about season 4 is that the problem isn't the fact that there wasn't enough added. It's just that the stuff that was added wasn't quite what people are looking for. Now, what wasn't added in season 4, which is big for a lot of people, is we didn't get any new weapons, which is a huge thing for a lot of people. Some people are very much in the mindset of, if you don't give me new weapons, I don't care what you add, just it's terrible. You need to give me new weapons or else I don't care about what happens in the rest of it, which is a little bit shallow in my opinion, but I can kind of see where they're coming from because the weapons are the main source of gameplay in the game. We didn't get a new mission type, which even though we've only had one new mission type added into the game with the industrial sabotage, a lot of people were probably wanting to see a new mission type, which is a bit disappointing. And especially since we didn't get weapons, I guess people were thinking it was going to be a one or the other type thing, and the fact that we didn't get either was a bit of a, disappointment. And then we also didn't get any new overclocks, which, like weapons, this is a very big thing about build crafting that people were a little bit disappointed that we didn't get any new overclocks. So ultimately, people felt like this season was very light compared to other seasons, which I think is a fair claim when you compare it to earlier seasons. Looking at season 1, for example, which is my personal favorite season and what I think is the gold standard of seasons, at least in my opinion, they had everything. They had new weapons, new enemies, new mission types, a whole slew of new overclocks. It was an insanely good season, at least in my opinion, in terms of just sheer raw content that was added into the game. And I think on that notion, the problem with season 4 isn't that it was bad. I think the problem was they set the bar for themselves a little bit too high. And because of that, when they go even just a little bit lower than that, people are a little bit disappointed. So I think that's a lot of what's going on here. But one thing that we also have to keep in mind that we can't really talk about season 4 without mentioning these are the maintenance updates. These updates came out several months after the season had launched, and they changed a lot of things about the game. We got 2 of them. We got one in November and one in February, and they did a lot of things to change the way the game was played. Fixed a lot of issues that people were having, as well as just give us some interesting things that we didn't necessarily ask for. So for the November one, we had the ability to actually turn off seasonal content, which this was big for a lot of people, especially people who did not like Rockpox anymore. Basically, if you got to level 100 in the performance pass, you then had the option to turn off seasonal content, which basically made it so that way the lithophage corrupted zone was taken off of your map, and the chances of you encountering anything that was lithophage related, i.e. the meteors, the corruptor, the lithophage mutation, all of that was changed to where it would be a normal occurrence compared to the rest of the random event. So you wouldn't get it any more than you would get any other type of random event. This was big. This was big for a lot of people because it meant that you didn't have to deal with Rockpox that much anymore, and it kind of brought it back to a stable and understandable amount, which was great. And it also was a foreshadowing of something that they had confirmed is going to be coming in Season 5, which is the ability to change seasons. This is something that they have confirmed is going to be coming in Season 5, and you'll be able to basically select what season pass you want to work on. As such, you will experience the content of that particular season, which I think is really, really cool. Another thing this update particularly added was the weapon maintenance system, which is essentially just another form of progression. It made it so that way, as you use particular weapons, you gain experience for them, and as you gain experience for them, you unlock new skins for them, which is cool. It's another form of progression. It's more cosmetic. It's something that they did say that they are going to be working on later on down the line, and they're going to be adding on to more and more as more seasons and stuff come out. So just another way for us to progress ourselves, which is great. One of the biggest things that this November update came to is the nerf to Rockpox effects. This update brought a big weakening effect to Rockpox as a whole, not necessarily one enemy or another, just overall Rockpox across the board was significantly tuned down with this particular update, which is great. From infection ranges to the amount of time that you were hindered, basically everything was dialed back a little bit to make Rockpox significantly more manageable. which I think is probably one of the biggest things that they have done in a while, because people do not like fighting Rockpox anymore. We are kind of over and done with Rockpox at this particular point, myself included. This also led to a very big nerf to the Corruptor, which made Herald significantly more manageable to deal with. They made his attacks easier to dodge, they made the damage a little bit better to deal with, they reduced his movement speed, and they made it so that way damaging his health was a little bit more consistent. The foam and the vacuum was not quite as janky. So overall, very, very good changes. This is the update that I think made Herald significantly easier to deal with and not nearly as much of a pain in the butt as he was before. And then for the February update, it wasn't quite as big as the November update. It still added a couple interesting things, but not quite as much. We got the Hidden Dwarf IPA drink, which is what gives us the ability to play prop hunt in the space rig, which is fun. It's just a fun little thing to do. I never have a problem with that sort of thing. And this also changed the armor breaking system and reworked it entirely. That was not even an issue with Season 4. That was just something that was in the game for a long time that they're finally fixing. And they fixed it, and it got a lot better. It's still a little bit janky in some cases, but it's certainly much better than it was before. And then they did a couple more bug fixes and tweaks to mechanics and gear across the board, just more general maintenance updates type things. And honestly, both of these updates kind of feel like mini seasons to me, almost. Not necessarily in the sense that they give you crazy things to do, but in the sense that a lot of these things are things that you see added into season updates for the most part. So a lot of this feels like stuff that they had wanted to initially put into Season 4, but maybe they just didn't have enough time at some point, based on scheduling or deadlines and stuff like that. They probably just couldn't put it in. So some of these things they probably did want to put in earlier, but they just couldn't. And a lot of these things were fixes in response to player feedback in terms of things like, the Stingtail and the Corruptor and whatnot. So with all that said, where does Season 4 stand right now? Where does the state of the game stand right now? And should we be excited or skeptical for Season 5? Well, starting off with the standing of Season 4, I think that it's a lot better than it was on release. I think in the very beginning, it was incredibly rough, and it was not super enjoyable coming right out of the gate, but I think that they have significantly improved on its performance a lot and have made it something that I think is a lot better than it was on release. I still do agree with the notion that it is probably the weakest season that we've had so far. However, even though it was still the weakest, I still had fun playing it, and I still respect it as a season in general. The concept and ideas were very cool and thematic. They kept going with the Rockpox storyline, which, regardless of how you feel about the Rockpox mechanic, the idea or the theme around Rockpox, to me at least, is a very cool concept. And the execution was, again, a little bit rough on release, but again, they got better with it later on. In terms of where the game itself is standing at this point, this might sound a little bit weird to some people, but I genuinely think the game is in a better state than it has ever been for a couple of different reasons. First, I think that the maintenance updates that we got as a concept are a very welcome thing. Most of the time when things like this happen in certain games, the devs just sort of let it go, or they say, hey, you know what, it's a big issue, we'll deal with it maybe when we deal with it, but if not, you're still going to play our game, right? But in this case, the devs have shown that they are willing to reply to fan feedback and fix the issues that are happening. And these maintenance updates are proof of that, because they not only fixed issues in the season as well as long-standing issues such as the armor breaking system, but they also just added things that they didn't necessarily need to. These could have been just fixes and patch notes that they had just decided to say, hey, we fixed a couple things. But instead they did that as well as giving us more things to work with, which I think is honestly something that you don't see too often. And it allows for adjustments based on player feedback, which again is something that, yes, some dev companies do, but not really to a very good extent, if that makes any sense. And now the devs are more aware of how the community is feeling than ever before, and they have shown that they are willing to respond and fix things. And then in terms of if you should be hyped or skeptical for Season 5, this is kind of up to you, but at least with me personally, the stuff that they have already shown looks really, really good to me. They've already confirmed several things for Season 5, even before they started the live stream that they're going to be doing in a few days. And that's the new theme, which is based on Rogue Core. It's not based on Rockpox, which is something that I'm sure everybody is finally happy to be done with. We are getting a new mission type, which is fantastic. They're giving us new enemies, which they haven't specified exactly how many or what they're going to be. They've given us a little bit of details, but I'm assuming they've learned from their past endeavors, and these things are going to be a little bit more balanced on release. And if not, they probably will fix them. They're giving us not new primaries or new weapons or anything, but they're giving us new overclocks for each of the primary weapons. So 12 new overclocks in total, which is great. Even if it's not weapons, it's at least new ways for us to build craft. and as well as the seasonal selection system, which for people who are just joining the game now, is going to essentially give them an incredible amount of content to work towards, because you have 5 whole seasons worth of content to work towards, which is great. And all of that isn't even everything that they have actually fully revealed. That's just the stuff that they wanted to release at the time. Overall, I think that the rocky history and lifetime of Season 4 has given the devs a lot to work with. And as such, they are going to put a lot of love and time into the stuff that we're going to be getting with Season 5, and also the other projects that they're working on, and give us a lot of things that the players have been wanting. So now we have arrived at the question from the top of the video. What is the final verdict of Season 4? Was it a disaster? Was it a success? Or is it sitting somewhere ambiguously in the middle? In my opinion, this is the perfect analogy that I think I can think of for Season 4. It's like a marathon runner who starts a race, immediately trips over himself on the first step, fumbles around a little bit, has to get up, brush himself off, but he recovers, gets back up to a good stride, and finishes not first, not second, not even maybe third, fourth, or fifth, but finishes in a respectable position to where he can at least say he did a good job. That, to me, is like the perfect way to summarize Season 4. It had a very rocky start. It didn't start off very, very well, but it came back to a decent position in the end. And it's not my favorite season at all, but it's definitely one that I'm happy to call a season, if that makes any sense. And if anything, it just put a little bit of extra fire under the devs to make future seasons and projects even better, which I have full faith that they're going to do, personally. And another thing to keep in mind, especially when thinking about this kind of stuff, is that seasonal shifts like this are just going to happen. You know, in games like this that have seasonal-based structures, they can't all be good. You can't have Season 1s every single time. You can't have Season 2s every single time. You're going to have some highs and you're going to have lows. In fact, I want every single one of you right now to leave a comment down below saying what your favorite game's worst season was. And if you think that that season is better than Season 4 of Deep Rock Galactic, because I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say. Well, there it is, my final verdict on Season 4 of DRG. Not the best, not the worst, but still a season that I'm happy happened overall. Let me know how you guys feel about Season 4 or the upcoming Season 5, and if you agree, disagree, or just whatever you want. And be on the lookout for a video covering what the devs are going to be revealing on their live stream on April 25th, as I frankly do not know when this video is going to come out, if it's going to be before or after. But I am certainly going to make a video of that as well, so be on the lookout of that. Anyway, hope you guys found this video helpful and informative. If you did, please be sure to like, comment, and maybe become a member if you liked. It would really help me out a lot, as it shows me what types of videos you guys want to see. Rock and Stone Miners, I will see you in the next video.